Welcome back, Focus Learners. Okay, so if you're gearing up for the Florida Real Estate Sales Associate exam, you probably already know that this sheer volume of legal jargon can feel, well, a little overwhelming at first. But hey, don't sweat it. Today we're going to completely demystify some of the most heavily tested, absolutely crucial core concepts around property rights. By breaking these down, you're going to see exactly how all these pieces fit together like a giant puzzle so you can walk in and conquer that exam with total confidence.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First up, estates, freehold versus leasehold. Second, co-ownership, sharing the title. Third, condos versus cooperatives. Fourth, leases and holdover tenants. And finally, number 5, an interactive exam practice quiz.
Section 1. Estates, freehold versus leasehold. So, what actually is an estate? Basically, it just refers to how much of a property you control and for how long. At the highest level, estates are split into two main families. On one side, you've got freehold estates. This is ownership for an indefinite, uncertain length of time. You own it, and there's literally no predetermined end date. On the flip side, we have leasehold, or non-freehold estates. Now, this is a possessory interest for a specific fixed and defined duration, meaning you possess it, but you don't own it outright forever.
Now, you might be wondering, what's the absolute gold standard of freehold estates? Well, that would be the fee simple absolute. When you see fee simple, or fee simple absolute pop up on your exam, just know that all three of those terms mean the exact same thing. It is the most complete, unrestricted form of ownership, literally the largest bundle of rights you can possibly hold in real property. In fact, most titles in the US are held in fee simple.
To really picture this, just think of a standard home purchase. You buy a house, the deed is put in your name, and you can sell it, mortgage it, or leave it to your kids when you pass away. It's perpetual, it's inheritable, you possess maximum rights.
Right, let's move on to our next freehold estate, which is the life estate. While it is still a freehold estate, because the exact end date is uncertain, its duration is strictly limited to the life of a natural person. We call this person the measuring life. Once that specific person dies, well, the life estate ends.
Here's a classic scenario you are definitely going to see on the exam. A husband leaves a property for his wife to use during her lifetime. When she passes away, the property automatically goes to their children. In this situation, the kids hold what's called a remainder estate, and they are officially known as the Remaindermen. Also, it's totally vital to note for your Florida exam that the Florida homestead is actually a legal life estate created automatically by law, and it protects a homeowner's principal residence from certain creditors.
Section 2. Co-ownership, sharing the title.
Okay, so there are 3 main ways to share a title. First up is tenancy in common, which is simply co-ownership with absolutely no right of survivorship. If you die, your share goes to your heirs, not your co-owner. But what if you do want your share to automatically go to your co-owner? Well, that requires a joint tenancy, which does include the right of survivorship. To legally create this, you gotta have the 4 unities. Just remember the insider acronym PITT, equal possession, equal interest, acquired on the same title at the exact same time. Finally, we've got tenancy by the Entireties. This is a very specific joint tenancy exclusively reserved for a legally married husband and wife.
Section 3. Condos versus cooperatives.
Now, this is a topic that trips up countless candidates, so pay close attention. It's all about understanding exactly what you're buying. With a condominium, you own your individual unit in fee simple. You actually get a deed to real property, and the local government sends an individual property tax bill levied directly on your unit. Easy enough, right? But with a cooperative or a co-op, you actually do not own the real estate. Instead, you own shares of stock in a corporation, and that stock ownership gives you the right to occupy a unit through a proprietary lease. Because the corporation owns the whole building, the corporation gets one giant property tax bill, and the shareholders simply pay a pro rata share of it. So just remember, condo equals real property deed, co-op equals corporate stock.
Section 4. Leases and holdover tenants.
Let's shift gears for a second and look at commercial lease structures, specifically based on who pays what. In a gross lease, which is what you typically see for residential apartments or standard offices, the tenant pays a fixed, flat rent, and the landlord covers all the taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Now, in a net lease, which is super common for standalone commercial spaces, the tenant pays a fixed rent plus a portion of the actual operating expenses. Then there's the percentage lease. Retail malls absolutely love these. The tenant pays a base rent plus a percentage of the gross sales generated right there on the premises. And finally, a graduated lease features scheduled, step-up rent increases at designated intervals over time.
But hey, what happens when the lease ends and the tenant just outright refuses to pack their bags? Well, you get what's called a tenant at sufferance, also known as a holdover tenant. This happens specifically when a tenant lawfully takes possession initially, but then just remains in possession after the lease expires, completely without the landlord's consent. Now, do not confuse this with a tenancy at will. A tenancy at will means the tenant actually has the landlord's permission to be there. At sufferance means they are hanging around without consent.
Let's make this real with a quick scenario. Say a commercial lease ends on June 30th. On July 1st, the tenant refuses to leave. Under Florida Statute 83.58, this is a seriously big deal. Not only can the landlord file for eviction using a summary procedure to get a faster court date, but the court may actually award the landlord double rent for the time the holdover tenant refuses to leave. Double rent. It's a fantastic exam distractor question, so definitely remember that penalty.
Section 5. Interactive Exam Practice Quiz.
All right, it is time to put all this knowledge to the test. I really encourage you to pause the explainer, lock in your answer, and then hit play to hear the rationale. Ready? Question 1. A tenant remains in a commercial office space after the lease expires on June 30th without the landlord's consent. What is the tenant's legal status? Go ahead and pause now.
And the correct answer is tenant at sufferance, or holdover tenant. Remember our rule from earlier? Because the tenant entered lawfully but stayed after the expiration without the landlord's permission, they are at sufferance. Okay, let's look at question 2. A retail business owner pays a base monthly rent of $3,000 plus 5% of all gross sales exceeding $50,000. What type of lease is this? Lock in your answer.
The correct answer is a percentage lease. Anytime you see a lease calculating a portion of the rental payment based on the gross sales or revenue generated on those leased premises, it is automatically a percentage lease.
Moving right along to question 3, which is a classic state exam question. Which form of ownership allows a unit to be mortgaged, taxed, and sold separately and independently from the rest of the structure? Lock in your answer.
The correct answer is condominium. Remember, a co-op involves shares of stock in the whole corporation, but a condo gives you a fee-simple deed to your specific individual unit, which means it gets its own tax bill and can be mortgaged and sold totally independently.
And our final question, if a lessee pays a fixed amount of rent plus all expenses like taxes and insurance, the lease is known as a what? Pause and think about it for a second.
The correct answer is a net lease. When the tenant or the lessee takes on the burden of those operating expenses on top of their fixed rent, it's a net lease. Well done. Honestly, mastering these specific definitions gives you the ultimate bundle of rights to pass your exam. But I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. As real estate increasingly moves into the digital space with virtual properties and smart contracts, how exactly will these centuries-old concepts of freehold estates and physical boundaries adapt to the future? Keep that in mind as you continue your journey. Stay focused, and we'll see you in the next explainer.